So, when you're ready to paper then, what you need is generally this basic toolkit. This should carry you through hanging all different types of wallpaper. Okay, so today we're hanging lining paper. This is a 1200 grade, so it's quite a heavyweight grade. If you had perfect walls and you just wanted to line them because you wanted the paper to go on top of a lining paper, you maybe wouldn't have to go for 1200. You'd probably go for an 800. Okay, so it goes up in twos. You've got 600, 800, 1000, 1200, 14, 16, 18 and 2000, and that's when your walls are really bad. So obviously the higher the grade you use on the walls that need it really. So if you've got a really old house and they were really uneven and cracked and things, you'd go for like a 2000. Whereas this one, it's a little bit heavy duty for these walls really, but it's what I've bought and it gives a good finish. You can paint over this or you can hang your paper over it. Okay, now on the information label, a lot of people, what they do is screw it up, chuck it away. Don't do that because it'll tell you quite a few things. On the lining paper, the main thing you want to know is the soaking time. Okay, now I've looked at the soaking time on this. I can't see it at the moment because it's really small, but it's 8 to 12 minutes. That means once you've pasted it, folded it, leave it for 8 to 12 minutes before you start to hang it. Okay, it'll tell you the length of the wall. It'll have symbols on like this, like paste the paper. Okay, it's a free match, no matching on lining paper. It'll tell you the width and the length of the paper. And this one, it's wet strippable. So when you get information labels, we will talk about them again when we do about finished papers, but you will have a lot of symbols to recognise. Okay, so that's important. Don't throw them away. All right, so that's your 1200 lining paper. So next thing you need is a smoothing brush. Okay, this is quite an old one I've had for a long time, as you can see, but as long as you wash it in warm soapy water and keep it free from paste, that'll last you a long time. That's made of horsehair, that one. Okay, that's a horsehair brush. It's quite coarse. You can put a lot of pressure on and you're not going to tear the paper. The only time you might tear the paper is if you do that and then slip and the corner of the wood tears the paper. But don't be bothered if you have, because it will go back, it will smooth back, so don't worry. So that's your smoothing brush. That's used to get air bubbles out and to apply the paper. Sponge, really important. Make sure you have a sponge and a bucket with some water in at all times. This is to wipe the paste off. If you think about when you're painting and you use masking tape to protect, say, sockets and things, you can't do that with paste. It's going to get everywhere. Okay, you can't mask up with paper in. So what you do is you make sure that you wipe every bit of paste off. If you get it on a surface like a socket, like a door frame, like a skirting, you wipe it off with just some warm water and a sponge. Okay. Then you've got two tools that you could use for your measuring. This one is just a box ruler. This one is a standard tape measure. Okay. You can use whichever you prefer. Oh, that one's not working very well. I prefer a box ruler when using paper. Okay. I find it easy to measure just because of this bit here. But, you know, it's all up to the individual. You can use whatever you want. All right. So the box ruler is 1000 millimeters long. All right. So, you know, in construction, we're working millimeters. So, and it works you up 100, 200, da 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 da. So, when you're cutting paper, sometimes you've got to be really accurate and you've got to use your millimeters rather than your centimeters. For lining paper, generally goes to the centimetre, but always call it millimetres. In construction, we talk in millimetres and we work out in millimetres. On the other side, there's inches, but I don't use them. Millimetres, okay? That's really good to just fold up and keep in your pocket. All right. Two types of screwdriver. Okay, you need the posi and the flathead. This is because you might need to undo sockets ever so slightly. Remember, if you're in a house, sockets are live. They're not like the ones at college where it's a blank plate. You cannot take them off. You can undo them ever so slightly, so they're probably about 3 or 4 mil away from the wall. And we do that because we took a very small amount of paper behind. But I'll show you that in a different video. A knife. Now this is what's called a snap-off knife. That must be retracted when you finish using it. Okay, if I was to use it, I must retract it before I put it back in my pocket. These have snap-off blades that can be snapped off to keep that edge really sharp. And you get replaceable blades with them. So really good, nice sharp knife for paper hanging. Paper hanging shears. Okay, these are stainless steel. These must be kept clean all the time. If you put them away in your toolbox and you've got paste on them, when you come to get them out, you're not going to get them open. So warm soapy water again on your shears. If they do get blunt, you can sharpen them with an oil stone, but make sure they're kept clean at all times. Sometimes I'll maybe get a bit of sandpaper and just give them a little bit of a rub, okay, just to clean that edge a little bit more. Okay, so they need to be kept clean for cutting lining paper, finishing paper. And then this here is the plumb bob. Now a plumb bob is a weight on the end of a string, okay, and that's used to create vertical lines. If you see this paper on this wall here, it's vertical lines, okay. If I hang the plumb bob down the wall and just let it drop, you can see that that is plumb, okay. If it was off there, I'd know that paper wasn't on plumb, but it's not. It's on that line, okay. So that paper is plumb, and you have to do that with finished papers, because if you get them lopsided, they're gonna look, the pattern's gonna run out. They're gonna look stupid if they're that angle. So you've got to put your paper on straight. So the person who did this room obviously has done really well. Okay. Next one, pencil. Yeah, or you have to have a pencil all the time. You're measuring, you're writing down measurements. You can write them on this lining paper. You can write them on the wall. Some people have a piece of paper taped to the board. They write them on the board. Whatever you're writing on, make sure you save your measurements. All right. That's also for marking the paper before you trim. This lovely tool here needs a bit of a wash, but it's a seam roller. Okay. When you're putting on a finished paper, sometimes the seam might be slightly proud like that. You might need to just roll your seam roller along the seam, and it just puts pressure on it and it just pushes it down. Whoever did this has done quite a good job, even without a seam roller, because there's no raised. But some papers you have to use one, and it does say it in the information label, so always have one of them. Now this is quite a big corking board. This is an Artex board. I use this on heavyweight finished papers. I don't use the smoothing brush because I can't get enough pressure on. I use a board, but I use it the same as I've used the smoothing brush. So, but this is for heavyweight papers, because sometimes you can't get enough pressure on with a smoothing brush and you need to put a bit more pressure on. That is really good for applying that. Again, this is a different style. Muraspec wall coverings. That's a extra wide paper, so that's for applying that. But what they're also good for as well is if you come to, say, a corner like this, tuck your paper in. Oops, I picked up the knife, picked up the blades. Tuck your paper in, and then your knife will go straight down the corner like that, and that'll hold it tight into the corner, and you'll get a really nice straight cut. Corners, ceilings, skirtings, no good on lining paper, blown vinyls, wood chips, because they're too pulpy. They haven't got that vinyl on the top. So you can't use this or that on a pulpy paper. You couldn't use this on, say, a blown vinyl that had an embossment, because you just flatten it. Whereas the smoothing brush is a lot smoother. Okay. This is a paste table that's actually a fold up one. It's up to you which type you use. This is quite a heavy duty one. It's not one of the ones like from B&Q for a £5. It's quite heavy duty, it's quite heavy. Obviously the reason I've got that is because I do quite a lot of papering, but if you find you're only going to do it once or twice a year, you may be better off just with a cheaper version. The ones we have at college, I've shown you already, 2 A-frames and a flat top. They're brilliant for if you're just keeping it at home, but if you need to travel, obviously you need a fold up one. And that's about it. So that's all your tools explained and your information label.